Hi, Blogging Heads viewers. It's Daniel Strauss of Woodruff and Strauss and Politico here today, and I am here with Jim Newell, sometimes but not frequent substitute for, I guess, me on the show. And now Jim is at Slate. Hi, Jim. Remember when we used to live together?
Hi,
Wasn't that fun?
Daniel. Yeah, I do remember that. I
And
do
then
remember
you
those
and then you
memories.
left me. Right now, I'm looking for a housemate, but I'm not bitter.
Oh man, this is just how it's gonna be for the next 20 minutes, huh?
So anyway, no, we're going to talk about politics today. We're going to talk about. Well, what do you want to start with first? You want to start with Republicans or Democrats or the professionalization of Donald Trump? I love that topic description, by the way, in its obvious irony, because he's supposed to be a businessman, but only now is he getting like legit and like
Yeah, and I mean, to what extent is he? I guess that's the big question because
right,
it seems like there was this desire within the media narrative to sort of latch on to any little thing that he does. Like, does he not retweet a you know thing calling Heidi Cruz ugly or something? Well, if he doesn't do that, then I guess he's more professional now. So it's like it's a very low bar that
yeah.
we're looking at
Well,
here.
yeah, it's a very low bar, but in the
But
in
it's a bar. It is a bar. So
but it is a bar. Number one. Number two, in his defense, in defense of all of this here, he did his last speech on the night of the New York primary was how do I say it, brief, which is rare for him. And he is bringing in new people, Paul Manafort, who's bringing in more legit operatives like Rick Wiley and some
right.
lawyery people whose names I should know. But, I'm covering Bernie now from Roslyn. So, and those seem to me like actual serious notable moves. It's not just he's out for a little while here.
No, those are legitimate hires, and I think it'll be a more professionalized campaign in that they may actually put together an operation for getting delegates or something like that.
Right.
The extent to which they'll be able to rein him in from being Donald Trump, which is, saying inappropriate things all the time. I mean, we'll have to see
Hey,
how long that
telling it
lasts.
like it is, right?
Right, telling it like it
That's
is,
what his
yeah.
supporters say. And the thing I love about that is that was actually literally Chris Christie's slogan, and now Chris Christie, in the words of Gawker, is now Trump's personal jester.
Yeah. I mean, you don't see much of Chris Christie anymore. He's not really strutted out anymore.
I mean, I think that's true. Although I did see him a picture of him with Trump greeting Mike Pence in Indiana, which sort of
Oh,
blew my
really? Oh, he
yeah
brought him out to Indiana.
yeah. Why is he in Indiana? I don't know.
Christie country. Who knows?
Is it?
It's I mean, one part of the professionalization, which I guess we could instead call more of a normalization, it's
Yeah.
becoming a more normal
Okay.
campaign, is he's doing fewer interviews now, which is one I think sort of a problem for the media because one of the things, even though he would say all sorts of crazy stuff, everyone liked how he was always taking questions. Like he would talk to you if you wanted to talk to him,
Oh yeah.
he'd pretty much talk to you. But now he's not going on Meet the Press anymore. He's sending, surrogates. He didn't take questions at his, event on Tuesday night at Trump Tower.
So you think this is gonna hurt him? You think this is gonna,
No, I
gonna,
don't. I don't think so. I don't know.
when he was the OG, he's not keeping it real anymore?
I think I think like yesterday in Maryland, he went back. He was calling people. He was going back to Lion Ted and like calling people names again. So he's not gonna be bored. Like he's not going to read from a script at rallies. Starting now, which would just be a total bore. But I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. Like a script.
But maybe I don't know. Maybe they are just reining in some of his worst impulses, which is maybe all he needs. He gets away with so much because of that low bar that if they just rein it in a little bit, like it's like okay, just you can go on with Lion Ted and everything. Just like don't retweet pictures of how Heidi Cruz is ugly or something. Like don't do that. Like don't like talk about how reporters who are manhandled, like maybe we're asking for it, like
Yeah.
you can stop doing that.
Right.
Like just don't go completely out of your way to screw it up and maybe he can close a little easier. So
I think by the way, what are his? Do you know? Do we have the other nicknames? I've been waiting for a Kasich nickname, but he hasn't given Kasich one, right? And it's incompetent Hillary, right?
I think he
Or
has
ineffective Hillary. I think it's. I
I
think,
think he has something better than ineffective Hillary.
but
Suboptimal Hillary.
subpar Hillary,
Yeah,
less than 100% Hillary.
I don't know. It's like dirty Hillary or criminal Hillary or something like that. He's gonna throw everything at Hillary, and not all of them are gonna be appropriate. But that's his later fight, I think.
So on the secret email journalist threads that you and I don't know anything about, there's constantly, I think, as far as I know, a question about credentialing and sort of one sign I think that the Trump campaign has not gotten any better or different at all. It's still always a manhandle of journalists trying to get credentialed for events. It's always a mystery. It's always our colleagues at competing publications being like, do you know how do I do this? Who do I call? Why is it normal for them to not respond until like a minute before?
It's weird. Like I'm more sort of I'm allowed to share my opinion more in my writing, and I say terrible things about the Trump campaign, but I've never had a problem getting in.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe it's probably
Awesome.
that I just don't. It's probably that I just don't matter enough. I don't know. But like you look at, there are some places that seem to be on permanent blacklists, like Mother Jones, Daily Beast. I don't know, like a few others where they've done something that got a lot of bad attention for the Trump campaign, and so they're not allowed in anymore.
Well,
But yeah, and then even if you get in though, I mean they do let you wander around a little bit if you're there early enough and talk to some people. But yeah, then they lock you in the cage and you have to be escorted off the premises or something, which they say is for security. I don't know.
we're journalists. The worst thing we can do is write something.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
exactly.
campaign and presidential events, in any cycle can be very dangerous, actually. And B, in this one, vis-a-vis my hometown Chicago, can get very heated with the Trump campaign. But
yeah, I think that was you all made it worse for everyone with your riots and stuff in Chicago.
That's not fair, Jim. I now have a DC license. So I see this right here. I'm hiding all the pertinent information. See this? This is proof that I am no longer a Chicagoan. I've renounced my citizenship to my hometown. Can you imagine that?
That's great. Now you're just another Beltway insider.
Now, where I wasn't before.
Another hack Beltway insider.
Is there anything else interesting to say about the Trump campaign right now? Is it getting a little boring to you? I mean, of course they're going to win.
Let's just look at the map for him.
Okay.
It looks like he did a little bit better than expected in New York, which is good. So he made up some of the deficit. He had built up in some of the other states coming in. He's going to do really well next week in the 5 states next week. He's going to win the vast majority of those delegates.
Right.
I mean, the next big test is Indiana, which is sort of, if you look at all the delegate projections, like some will have him around, you need 1237 to get the nomination in the first ballot. Some will have him around 1175 or so if they don't count any of Indiana's delegates. And there are, I think 57 in Indiana.
Yeah.
And, some will have him much closer at like 1220, where they basically are probably going to have to give it to him if he's at 1220 if he does win Indiana. But no one knows what's going to happen in Indiana because it hasn't been polled once, and one reason is because it's illegal there to do automated dialing, which is how a lot of the pollsters.
I did not know that.
Yeah, no, it's just Indiana and North Dakota, the only 2 states where it's illegal to do any sort of automated dialing. You have to have like a live caller, so that makes polls much more expensive.
Wow.
Yeah, so no one knows what's going on in Indiana, and like some are like, well, maybe it's more like Illinois or Ohio where Trump did better. Even Trump lost Ohio to Kasich, but he still did pretty well. But some are like, well, maybe it's more like Wisconsin where Trump was just destroyed. So it's like sort of hard to figure out the demographics there. But I mean, that's sort of like, that's a state where Trump could really change his trajectory. He could get, end the primary season with like 1175, in which case maybe it's more of an open scenario, or it could end with, 12 something, in which case it would be much more difficult to take the nomination away from him. So that's like the beginning of May. I think the week after next week.
Right. It's just a series for the next. Okay, and so after that, I've actually, because I'm on the Dem side.
Then after that, you have what are the remaining states? Like Montana and South Dakota, Cruz is going to win those. And those are winning.
West Virginia and Oregon, I think, too.
Yes,
a premier?
West Virginia, which is a very weird system. Like you vote directly for the delegate, but there are like 200 delegate candidates on the ballot or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a little bit trickier. Um, yeah, or Oregon and Washington on the Republican side, where I don't know. I know what's going to happen there. And then obviously California, where it's 172,
And
54
Kentucky,
million.
right? Kentucky's in there too, right?
Oh, well, it may be on the Dem side. But
Maybe on the Dem side.
the Dems have it coming up, but Republicans did it a couple of months ago. They had a caucus because remember it was about like they wanted
With
Rand Paul,
Rand, yeah. How
so
could
they
I
made the
forget?
caucus and did it earlier.
A lot of good that did Rand.
Yeah,
Because Rand was my candidate before I switched over. So,
oh, really?
yeah,
Okay.
that was, it was, you know, it was the point of my reporting. The goal was to always make sure to fill in the overarching narrative of this guy used to be huge, and just never took off.
Well, maybe he dropped out because of your journalism.
I
which
think
exposed
Politico. I think Politico did have a part in hindering the rise of Rand Paul. I think I'll say that.
Wow.
Wasn't really me, but
The
yeah.
dishonest Politico.
Yeah, so we've been called that.
Don't trust the Politico.
Yeah, so Donald Trump has has tweeted at us a few times and said, dishonest Politico, money losing Politico that nobody reads, which makes no sense because if nobody reads it, Donald,
You're just swimming in dollars over there. You're gonna take a nice bath in a Scrooge McDuck style of gold coins.
I mean, I sit there and I think, man, before Jim moved out on me and I got to Politico, life was terrible. But now,
Yeah.
swan dive.
Yeah,
That's exactly what happens.
looks wonderful. Yeah, nice office by the way. Anyway, let's talk about the Democrats.
Okay, the Democrats is something I can talk about more. I have a piece that we'll link to at the bottom about how going forward things are going to get real rocky for Bernie. And the truth is, because if history is any indicator, the rule in this cycle has been Hillary wins closed primaries with only Democrats, and Bernie wins open primaries and open caucuses, where people other than Democrats can vote. And these next set of primaries are closed primaries, which are looking real good for Hillary. Even though it's in a part of the state that Bernie has done generally well in, the Acela corridor, still not looking good. And I was talking to a Bernie aide yesterday, and, it was clear to me in that conversation that things are not going to get easier on Tuesday. Down the road, though, things will be easier. I think there are some Western states still to vote. Oregon, which I think Jeff Weaver, who you and I should talk about in a sec, is fertile ground for Sanders, but
it's not enough.
It's not enough, and
he's already down to a, some would say, insurmountable deficit. Under Hillary, and next week there's Pennsylvania, Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut,
and Delaware,
and Delaware, yeah. So especially Pennsylvania and Maryland. I mean, that's a lot of delegates. Bernie's already at a bad margin. That's going to be wider after next week. It looks like. He's going to do well in Oregon. He's going to run up the score in Oregon, I would imagine. But then he's going to have lost too much ground this week, and this is sort of the story of the campaign. She wins a big state or two, or she won some states in the South by huge margins that wipe out everything else he does, and then he can rattle off a few wins in a row, and it just doesn't matter. It all gets eaten up. So we're looking again at the question of when and how is he going to have to drop out. And this is sort of what's an interesting thing that's been going on with his staff the last couple of days. You've had, on the one hand, Jeff Weaver, who's his campaign manager.
His longtime campaign manager.
He's sort of, he's a Bernie loyalist. He's sort of the guy in the campaign who's been with Bernie his whole career.
Right.
Now. And he actually, it was sort of an extraordinary sight on Tuesday night after the New York primary. He was with Steve Kornacki and MSNBC, with Steve Kornacki's delegate board. And, Steve Kornacki is a pretty bright guy. He was just pointing out, here's what you have coming up. These are going bad for you. These are going bad for you. These are going bad for you. And Weaver was like, oh, well, we have Oregon and we have, Nebraska and things, whatever. And Kornacki's like doing the math there. He's like, yeah, but you're like, that doesn't get you anywhere.
And then Weaver
says, so then they start talking about, well, then Weaver says, well, Hillary's probably not going to get a majority of delegates through pledged delegates alone, which is quite possible. So then we may, go to the convention and spend the month and a half after the primaries and the convention begins trying to sway superdelegates.
Right. He said, yes, absolutely, in response to Steve's question on that.
He said, yeah, Steve asked him if he would do that, if they would go to the convention and try to get superdelegates. And he said, quote, at this point, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And he's been saying stuff like this before, Weaver. He's been saying, it's going to come down to superdelegates, so we can go to the convention and try to sway them, which is tricky in a couple of ways. One is most of these delegates are going for Hillary.
They're committed now. I mean,
they're committed now. I mean, you can. They are.
So far, the Sanders campaign.
They can change their mind, but they're not.
Right. And so far, the Sanders campaign has courted uncommitted superdelegates, and they've had some success, but nowhere near the flood they need.
Yeah. So they're
to change.
There's 712 superdelegates. I think right now the count is something like Hillary has 480, Bernie has about 35.
Right. I think it's 469, 31. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's probably
right.
So, and the other problem is earlier in the campaign season, and this fit more in line with Bernie's message, was they were talking about what if Bernie won a majority of pledged delegates, but then the Hillary superdelegates overturned the will of the voters. And so the Bernie campaign was saying a lot, that would be completely undemocratic or whatever. But now they're in the situation where they would be the ones who need to do that. They would be the ones who need to overturn the will of the pledged delegates. So anyway, Weaver has this sort of aggressive line. On the other hand, you have Tad Devine.
Right. It's Devine. And Devine is in the pool of national presidential level Democratic strategists. So he's of that rank within the party where, they go and they lead a campaign. Weaver is a longtime campaign manager for Sanders on his Senate campaigns in the past, but not at the presidential level. Devine is an outside guy who was hired to not professionalize, but to be that person. And this is very normal for a presidential campaign.
Yeah, no, and he was one of the first hires too, and he was someone who's like, okay, Bernie's taking this seriously. He's not just trying to make a message, he's trying to have a win here.
Right.
So, and he's been saying, and he said Tuesday night after the loss, like, well, we'll see how next Tuesday goes, the April 26th primaries, and then we'll reassess. And then he said something else yesterday, like, we lost more ground in New York than we thought we were going to. So it looks like something where the sort of outside guy, the mercenary, who's done a good job but recognizes it's probably going to come up short and has a future in Democratic politics.
You think?
Yeah, is saying, we'll have to look after this next big wave of states. And so what I wonder is maybe they're on the same page. Like a lot of, sort of BS is put out there about like, oh, we're going to go all the way to the convention, like maybe Weaver doesn't actually believe that. You're just trying to rally up people while you can, but then they're not actually planning to do that. And I think that's probably it. I'm just sort of wondering, if the Sanders campaign will try to cut some sort of deal, maybe get some of his ideas into her platform before.
Right, that's the big mystery that's been hanging over there. Like, what is Sanders' end goal? Where does he do that? Does Elizabeth Warren play some kind of power broker here in all of this? Josh Marshall has been writing about Weaver for a little while. My old boss, Josh Marshall, at Talking Points Memo, and he's been saying that Weaver seems to be a destructive sort of force in the campaign and kind of toxic, and sort of unhelpful to a lot of aspects. My colleague, Gabe Debenedetti, who got the hard knock life assignment of going to the Vatican with Bernie, reported that there was when that happened and Bernie made that decision, the entire senior staff, so that's like Devine, Weaver, one or two other people, did not know about it. So there are again and again legitimate reports and sort of arguments out there that not everyone is in sync in this campaign right now. And maybe it's not like a full-on power struggle, which happens sometimes in campaigns, but there's definitely a few wires that are not connected.
Yeah, and I mean, Weaver is sort of he's always been the more aggressive one, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there was, because there's been some discussion like in the campaign about, whether they should try to go after Hillary's emails or something. And I think Bernie himself shoots it down,
Right.
But
Right.
maybe Weaver is like, come on, let's get at the emails. So I wonder if maybe there's that, like Bernie is shooting down some of the more, aggressive approaches. Maybe he'll eventually put the kibosh on, like, let's go to the convention or whatever. Because that would just sort of, I mean, Bernie doesn't really have, he's not going to run for president again, so he could sort of like wing it, and say go to the convention anyway. But you just sort of eventually have to look at the writing on the wall.
I gotta say, by the way, that
like Hillary's delegates or Hillary's superdelegates are not going to turn to Sanders, and
right,
who don't have any relationship with and overturn the will of the voters. So.
Right. I gotta say, when I'm Sanders' age, I want to be as spry as him. I mean,
no,
like,
he does it. It's exhausting, man. I go to one event and I need a nap after that.
Yeah, I'm done. But Sanders is out there flying around, ditching his press corps for. Okay, after New York, he ditched his press corps, flew back to Vermont for a day to chill out, which is normal what he did. But still crafty move. So Jim, we usually close out at Blogging Heads. Or at Woodruff and Strauss on Blogging Heads with some sort of anecdote, because our viewers love to hear about what it's like to be young and journalisty in DC. So
you didn't tell me to prepare an anecdote.
I didn't. Yeah, well, keeping you like.
Well, I can tell you what I'm doing today.
What are you doing today?
I'm going to the No Labels luncheon.
Oh, you're going to that?
Yeah, are you going to that?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm RSVP'd to it. So
I'm going to that. So that's like the sort of they try to be bipartisan.
Yeah, Bill Richardson. Remember when he was
Bill Richardson, and also Joe Lieberman and John Huntsman and other
all presidential candidates, former presidential candidates.
And they're going to have a list out of policy ideas that supposedly everyone loves and should go through. So I'm going to go and watch the presentation of that today.
I was thinking about this, and Huntsman was one of the first campaigns I covered, but by then it was pretty much over. But I'm just sort of, if you look at the divergent paths of John Huntsman and Mitt Romney, who have had sort of parallel lives in a lot of ways, Huntsman opted to be this sort of moderate voice, and Romney opted to be this party leader. And I think it just says something about the state of politics right now, that Romney is far more influential than Huntsman. Granted, Romney got the nomination, and Huntsman didn't. And there are a lot of Republicans who still think Romney's like the bee's knees. But I think it does say something, the gap in power and influence between Huntsman and Romney.
Yeah, I mean, Huntsman was the one that the Obama administration was so scared of that they thought we need to hire this guy and made him ambassador to China. So, I don't know. It also, I mean, that shows also the importance of who you hire as your campaign strategist, because Huntsman hired John Weaver, who is currently Kasich's campaign guy.
Yeah.
Weaver has a tendency of hiring guys who will be like, let's, call out the crazies in our parties, and then that makes the base hate them. So...
Yeah, what's going to happen to John Weaver after this cycle? Was this a success? He got very far. He led a campaign that went.
I mean, he won one state.
He won the home state.
I have a theory in my head that the reason Kasich is staying is because John Huntsman's trying to show that he can get
John Weaver.
John Weaver
is
trying to show that he can get beyond South Carolina, but
Right, and so the backstory with Weaver is that he's consistently focused on New Hampshire as sort of a comeback strategy. And that worked this time, as Kasich came in second behind only Trump and ahead of Chris Christie. I was in the room when Chris Christie, at election night in New Hampshire, where Chris Christie had sort of was visibly shell-shocked with how badly he did face. I mean, they knew going into it, it was not going to be great, but they were...
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad.
It was bad.
So, Jim, we're at 25 minutes. Thank you very much. Ex-housemate, always friend, an insightful chronologer of politics.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Daniel. Always a pleasure, etc.
Yeah. I'll see you later. All right. Bye.
Bye.